Good afternoon. I'm Philip Curry. I'm Associate Provost with responsibility for the arts here at MIT, and I want to welcome you to the public presentation by Olafur Eliasson of the 2014 Eugene McDermott Award in the Arts at MIT. We look forward to a stimulating presentation about the wide range of the remarkable artist's work. The title of his presentation is intriguing, to say the least: Holding Hands with the Sun. Now, before introducing Olafur, let me extend a special greeting to Mrs. Margaret McDermott. She's a dear friend. She is a dear friend, extraordinary benefactor, a very special guest, who traveled all the way from her home in Dallas to be with us on this, the 40th anniversary of the Eugene McDermott Award. I had the enormous privilege of visiting with Margaret in Dallas just a few weeks ago, where she is the city's leading patron of the arts. Her hospitality, incidentally, is second to none. Accompanying Margaret on this visit is her daughter, Mary McDermott Cook, who is with us right here. Delighted you're here, Mary. Among her many activities in Dallas and beyond, she is president of the Eugene McDermott Foundation. We're thrilled, really, to have you, both of you, returned here back to MIT. You honor us by being here. Let me say a few words about the McDermott Award and what the McDermott family has done for MIT. Established in 1974 by Margaret McDermott to honor her late husband, Eugene, co-founder of Texas Instruments, the McDermott Award recognizes individuals whose artistic trajectory and body of work indicate that they will achieve the highest distinction in their fields. The award is considered an investment in the recipient's future creative work rather than a prize for a particular project or a lifetime of achievement. A special feature of the award is the campus residency, and an important focus, one that Mrs. McDermott herself has encouraged. That is the direct interaction with students, a goal that has been realized in exemplary ways in this residency. Most of all, the McDermott Award reflects MIT's commitment to risk-taking, problem-solving, and connecting creative minds across disciplines. I just want to add that the McDermott family have been major contributors to MIT's top-ranked public art collection, and the McDermott Scholarship Endowment Fund has supported more MIT undergraduates than any such fund at MIT. It really is a tribute to this family and their support to us. Now, permit me to recount just a few aspects of Olafur Eliasson's work, some of which, of course, you just witnessed. I believe you'll understand why he's such an ideal recipient of the McDermott Award. His extraordinary body of work encompasses a broad range of creative practices spanning art, science, and psychology. He has made strikingly original contributions to public art, to architecture, and recently to social entrepreneurship. His installation, The Weather Project, which we just saw a bit of, was visited by more than 2 million people. For this project, he installed an immense artificial sun in London's Tate Modern, transforming that cavernous turbine hall with ethereal light and fog, and producing a completely unique, immersive environment. Through such phenomenological investigations of light, color, atmosphere, and water, he has probed the nature of space and of human perception. Olafur Eliasson is probably best known in this country for 2 exhibitions. One is Take Your Time, Olafur Eliasson. It was a survey exhibition organized in 2007 by the San Francisco Museum of Art, which traveled until 2010, stopping in New York at MoMA and at the Dallas Museum of Art. The other is New York City Waterfalls, commissioned by the Public Art Fund in 2008 with the support of then-Mayor Michael Bloomberg. It's a series of 4 man-made waterfalls in the East River in New York. Most recently, our McDermott honoree collaborated with engineer Frederick Ottesen, who is with us this evening, to develop Little Sun, which you saw in the video, a portable solar-powered LED lamp for the 1.6 billion people worldwide without access to electricity, which he calls a work of art that works in life. You will understand why Olafur Eliasson's work resonates with the creative values of the MIT community. We particularly admire the wide-ranging and ambitious nature of his creative practice, which spans multiple domains without regard for disciplinary boundaries. We admire the collaborative enterprise that drives his creative output. We admire his relentless experimentation with light, space, movement, and the nature of human perception, which compels audiences to engage with their environment and with one another. And we admire his confidence that art makes a difference in this world of ours. We look forward now to hearing from Olafur Eliasson, our 2014 McDermott Award recipient. Olafur, please come up, and a round of applause for this remarkable artist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a long intro, hard to follow. A lot has been said already. Thank you, Margaret, for having me. You look so great today. No, it's very exciting to be here. I have, in fact, been here already for, it's now the second day, and this is my fourth lecture, so I'm sort of warmed up. And it's been a big experience to enjoy the hospitality of MIT, sort of hopping through the departments and seeing all the incredible, the mass of research going on and the degree of criticality and self-criticality. So that of course, is very inspiring. I've had a very now I have so much stuff in my head, so I hope I can, to some extent at least, talk a little bit about the works that I brought on my computer, because I have a lot of new ideas now. But let me start by talking a little bit about the project that was briefly mentioned. It is 10 years old as of this winter, and it was a project which to me meant a sort of a strong increase in the confidence of the potential of what creativity can actually do. And it also brought me to this idea that, well, maybe it's to some extent about art, but maybe it's really about people. And I'm confident that the systems in which art work, the museums and galleries and so on and so forth, but also the wider systems, the general confidence in creativity in art, in culture, in the greater society, I'm sure that art has something to offer, which is a kind of a model of how we respect each other, how we share things, how we discuss with each other. Art has something there which I think is highly valuable. So I've become increasingly involved with working against the marginalization of art and culture in political systems, in the sort of society systems, the idea of what is civic society, how it is structured, and so on. And the reason why this project here, the Tate Modern, was important for me was that it, for me, showed a space in which people came in. And the Turbine Hall in London is an old power station, the south side of the Thames, and the project opened, and it was first shown at the weather forecast in the news. And as we know in England, everybody loves, like here too, everybody loves the weather. And the weather is interesting because besides being the nature, or the bit of nature we have in cities, you know, it rains, this is like the nature kind of entering culture if you want, but the weather is also sort of a space where we can actually have a different experience of the weather. Oh, I really hate when it rains. And the person next to me says, oh, I really love when it rains. And I still like that other person. I say, oh, we can be together. So interestingly, a museum or a platform on which one can have art is to some extent a success with regards to facilitating this ability to disagreeing and sharing at the same time. So you can be singular. This is my view on the world. And you can at the same time be plural. This is, I need to share the world, disregarding that I disagree. And as we look at the greater society, we of course can see that a lot of, how should I say it, like polarization, exclusion. Oh, if you disagree, you're not welcome. If you're different, you're not welcome. If you're not, kind of synchronizing with me, I'm actually not going to work with you. So in this case, and I think there's something about art here, it was a space where there was a highly singular or highly personal experience. People, they looked and they sort of started behaving differently than they do in museums. Normally, as you can see, they laid down on the floor, they stayed longer, they kind of brought in their picnics on the floor, and they sort of spent time and used the museum in different ways. I would say it also became a public space. It was almost like the city took a part of the museum to its heart. The idea of public being something where you can have both shared experiences and individual experiences became possible. I like this idea of being singular and plural at the same time. I think there's something very democratic about it, something about sharing values and also respecting the individual needs. See, this is a small film. Let me see if I can turn it on. So people are, as you can tell, laying on the floor. The distance to the ceiling is roughly 30 meters. Of course, looking up to the ceiling 30 meters is something, but you're sort of looking down again with 30 meters down again. So that means you're looking 60 meters, and finding yourself at a distance of 60 meters is exciting because you cannot help seeing yourself in the context of the space. So you're not just looking for yourself. You are, in fact, also seeing yourself in the, let's say, in the greater system of the space. It's hard to focus and talk and sort of listen to me at the same time. I could say a lot about this project because also I think it's important to see that looking at a work of art almost as a, I wouldn't say a machine, but as a phenomena creator in which the performance of the audience or the user or the spectator becomes the vehicle for the artwork is an interesting idea, I think. I worked always like, let's see if we can hand over a great degree of the responsibility of making the artwork to the people who actually use it. Use is sort of pragmatic and it's lovely demystifying, but use in the sense that you make an effort, you come into the museum and you engage. You might immerse yourself, you engage in terms of you go look for something. When you look at a work of art, you start a journey in which your effort is requested. So it's not like consuming. It's not like sitting in a Hollywood sort of movie and just kind of, taking it all in, doing nothing, right? You have to work a little bit. You have to kind of give a little bit of yourself. If the artwork is successful, I think that it actually succeeds in, how should I say it, verbalizing something, or bringing language to something which you already feel, you kind of have it in yourself, but you haven't quite verbalized it yourself yet, right? So you go and you look for something, and what you're looking at is actually yourself, right? And of course, this can then be debated and so on and so forth, but generally speaking, a great work of art somehow brings to language something that you already know, but you haven't quite figured out how to say it, right? So it's very interesting. It's almost like it reflects you. So in that sense, it's a little bit, I wouldn't say therapy, but I just don't, it's a little bit like you go and you make an effort, and sometimes the effort to understand something is more important than the understanding itself. The effort or the process or the time it takes for you to kind of get involved, and this is why this is such an exciting little film, the time it takes for you to get involved is as valuable as the time for you to kind of say, okay, now I got it and I can go home. See, there is not so many spaces in the world that facilitates that type of activity. We have academia, we have great academic sort of methodology, and we have places like MIT where people exercise the questions and the critique of the questions as an integral part of the questions, right? So and of course, structural thinking, structuralism, and postmodern thinking brought a lot of new tools to the toolbox in which I was educated, the times, the early 90s, and so on and so forth. This is one of my very first pieces. It's a rainbow in the lack of a better photo. It's just drizzling water and a little spotlight. And as we know, a rainbow takes a little more than the spotlight and the drizzling water. It also needs the eye. So you have the eye, this one. It's funny, the eye is actually, it's like a little machine, right? You can even see the eye. Do you know this experiment? Probably somebody from MIT came up with that. That experiment, if you press the eyeball, you can sort of see how the image, so it's a little sort of spherical thing in your head. Anyway, the eye, drop, light, that makes a rainbow. So if I stand here, I see one rainbow, but my friend over here, right, sees another rainbow. So we can kind of agree, okay, this is a rainbow, but it's not the same rainbow. It's two different rainbows. And this is, so removing the traditional art object, this is 93, making space for the subject, or the spectator in this case, suggesting that the producing the I component is a part of the artwork, was almost suggesting, well, maybe the artist, maybe the biographical sort of material is less important, maybe the biographical material of the spectator, the working spectator, the producing spectator, the co-author is the protagonist. This became the beginning of investigating public space, different spaces, architecture, and this is a project, this is in Sweden, this is the parliament in Sweden, the parliament sort of on the island. This is called Ström. It's a lovely, very clean water, Ström. The Swedes, they love their clean water, coming straight up, going into the ocean. And with a little bit of non-toxic dye normally used for tracking ocean currents, you sort of, with an instant, you can kind of dye a whole river green. And a number of artists has been played with these things. And what I think is interesting here is that the city as such is, of course, when we think about it, something organic. Like it's the life between buildings that makes up a city. What sometimes happens is that the city is so self-obsessed with its own image that it kind of leans towards something more static. We see a lot of cities in Europe that are, to some extent at least, turning into museums. Now, this is a debate within urbanistic planning, and to what extent does cities actually represent the values of the societies in which they are? Or are they becoming, so let's say, monuments of certain times where other values was guiding? So the idea of sort of recalibrating the depth of the space with regards to its hospitality, I thought I could just toss a little bit of color into a river like that and kind of with almost like a shock effect, suggest, well, this space is in fact organic. It moves, it passes by, time is very important. If you have time, you also have activity. If you have activity, there's more space for people. So in the great tradition of, very typically Scandinavian investigative methodology of how to generate public space, this was, I think, a project that I did again and again and with some success. Next day, the police in Sweden wrote in the paper that a lot of people had called into the police and asked, why on earth was there? And the police had calmed down people saying that the parliament actually had a leak in the heating system. This is the Swedish way of keeping people calm. So the idea of making things explicit at the Green River, making it explicit is also having confidence in the physicality of it. Instead of looking at a picture, actually engaging in the, let's say, the water and the things that are hard to understand, such as time, passing of time. It's like a little bit abstract. One of the great questions today is like everybody knows what a glacier is, because some people even have been on a glacier. But everybody also knows, so we have the climate crisis, and we have the general question about how to understand what ice is, and what the climate is, and what the ephemera is, the changing of climate. I'm a part of a generation where, when I was a child, the climate was natural, right? So it was considered, okay, here I'm in culture, and over there is nature. This is interesting, and I was, when I grew up, I hiked a lot with my father, and so I went a lot to glaciers and so on. But as I grew older, I realized, well, the climate is not natural. The climate is in fact cultured. It is, to some extent, and increasingly acceptably, man-made, or woman-made. And the thing here is, I think the thing is, the challenge lays with how do we make things explicit from theoretical knowledge to physical knowledge. Of course, that's an old story within art, and if you have an idea here, I have an idea for a work of art, it's still not a work of art until I've done it. The journey between thinking and doing, as we know, can be very wide, and there's a lot of steps in there where you are sort of working as a mechanical engineer, if you want, the same thing, right? Thinking, doing. And the steps, I think, are very important. And when I've been here at MIT, sort of on a side note, it is all about bringing thinking and doing together, bridging that gap. So in this case, I thought, well, people in Berlin here can't go to Iceland. So I'll just bring the glacier to Berlin. So it froze down a space minus 10 degrees. And the glacial blocks of the Vatnajökull, they drops off the glacier as it sort of falls into the ocean, and I could pick it up with a tractor on the beach and just ship it in a frozen fish container to Berlin. Very easy, actually. And then I'll show it there. And as you can tell, it's so beautiful, the ice itself. And what is maybe more important is that you can actually touch it. And it's incredible. And you touch it, you go, oh, it's really cold. It's so funny. And there is something here which is very essential, because it's about bringing, we knew it was cold. It's no surprise. But yet, when you touch it, it is different than from what you knew. So this is very important, the kind of idea of bringing knowledge and action together, simply by touching. So the title here, Holding Hands with the Sun, you can see where this is going. So let me just show you this. Now I have to figure out. So this is, it's going to be a little loud, so, or maybe not. Let me just say something before I started, because you can't, I could tell before you didn't listen when I was talking. So basically, ice floor, very big ice floor, totally known. This is in Sao Paulo. It's at the Sao Paulo Biennial quite a while ago. So interestingly, everybody, like everybody else, as I said, know about ice. That's very easy. From a distance already, oh, it's ice. And then you sort of, oh, interesting. Then you start running. So very disruptive to the exhibition again. So people running through the exhibition. And they're kind of being loud and so on. And have a look at this. Let me just see how I get it going. So it's very destabilizing. And, sorting out your motoric skills, disregarding that you know very well what ice is. So this is the opening in Sao Paulo, and I was sort of wondering what was going to happen, and people are reconsidering the rules of
udvikle sig til en glasforsikringssag.
The exhibition started the next day. And 3 days into the exhibition, the Biennial decided to close it. It was just too much. It sort of didn't fit the kind of behavioral construct of an art institution. I don't know if you can see, the ice continued on the outside. You see in the back of the glass, and there's a bit of ice outside. So if you couldn't pay, or didn't want to pay, to go in, you could also have a little skate on the outside. And that glass boundary was interesting. As we know, the glass is a social boundary and so on and so forth. This is a fantastic Niemeyer building. So this idea of, the social boundaries. So I don't mean to, by all means, there's not so much ice in Sao Paulo. And I don't mean it, there's so much other stuff, so it's not really about that. But listen, the thing is, the discrepancy between knowledge and physical knowledge became very clear here, because some people actually sat down on the ice and said, oh, it's nice and cool here in this hot space. And the nice thing was they said, oh my God, the ice is melting when you sit on it. Right? So they knew perfectly well what it was. This is Sylvie Fleury. Do you know her? So my private home video here. This is the curator being a little bit concerned. No? That was Adriano Pedrosa. But let me see if I can. So these sort of interventions investigating the boundaries of where do our, how far does our tolerance or hospitality, our sense of space go with regards to, can we actually exercise the idea of diversity we have? Because we have such great thoughts about how resourceful we are with regards to hospitality, right? So we think, oh, of course, but you can do anything if you want. In this museum, you can have any type of exhibition if you want, as long as it's not noisy, of course, and so on and so forth. So again, even our values, the values we carry with us through society, sometimes we think, oh, if somebody falls over on a bike, of course I will go over and help the person. It's like, get up. But then you're on the street and somebody falls over on the bike, I go, oh my God, this person is drunk. Or, can I help? Or am I going to get into? So all these sort of boundaries between, what and how do you act in public space? Right? It's very complex. And of course, we would want a public space that actually facilitates the trust in this way. But the truth is that's not always the case. What type of space, what type of architecture, what type of pavement actually facilitates the values that we think or we have, but we don't know actually how to bring into doing. This is a project, this is Johannesburg, it's also in the 90s. I emptied out a small rainwater reservoir to kind of create a little river that I called the ocean. It was sort of an action. I was invited for a biennial, had a nice little photo piece about Scandinavia, and I was walking around in downtown derelict Johannesburg at the time, 96 I think it was, Okuyen Visa was the curator. And I said, oh my God, this is so typical. Here I am all the way from Berlin at the time in Johannesburg. My God, I have to do something different than just showing a photo. A photo of Iceland, by all means. So I said, oh, look at this incredible rainwater reservoir. Why don't I rent a little diesel pump and empty it out on the street and see if I can make a river? And of course, the curator, I didn't ask him because, because it was sort of, it was interesting time. So 96 Johannesburg, downtown derelict, squatted buildings, the Anglo-Saxon Bank, the Diamond Stock Exchange, the Diamond Building, and very complex area. And I thought the idea of erosion, time, river, like a poem, like a little river that just comes and goes, was very beautiful. It's rainwater, so it wasn't really, so it rains enough for collecting the water and using it for public irrigation. And this is the river. I can talk more about it. As you can tell, it ran roughly a mile and a half through sort of organized and unorganized areas, and it ended up in the in the sewer. This is in Los Angeles, lots of sun, morning, sort of midday, late afternoon. And if you walk in, you can actually see that the light is moving. It's very beautiful, very good for LA. You sort of stand there, you go like, is this art? And then you go, then it's like interesting, there's nothing there, and suddenly your own presence becomes quite explicit, and you so it's interesting, before the light was over there, and now it's here. And suddenly there's that kind of cosmic connection. I won't overdo that, but it's interesting because it actually does change a lot. Have you been on the street watching how the pole of the shadow of a street lamp, it actually moves like very fast. And that is the speed with which the planet travels through space around the sun. Obviously, as we have come to learn, the sun actually doesn't move. It's the Earth that goes around. So what you can see is, in fact, you're traveling. And it's time travel, so to some extent, it's the time it takes. So there's a lot of stuff in here, and I think what we are, I guess, to some extent, with regards to being abstract, making things explicit, also has to do with, do we actually succeed to see the planet, or the idea of the planet, as one thing? How do we identify with the planet as one object? So I've been very interested in these sort of questions from cosmology or deep space cosmology. How do you understand the planet in the context of the universe? Now this gets a little abstract, but the point here is, I think one of the greater challenges with regards to, for instance, the climate crisis, we spoke about that. The climate crisis is that it does require that you kind of think of the planet as an object. Sort of does, you do need to sort of think of everything at the same time, which is very difficult. Because it's sort of difficult enough to even understand America as one sort of ecosystem, to see the whole thing, and this idea of interdependence, collectivity, the global sort of idea of sharing responsibility. How does responsibility feel? Right? It's very difficult. So in that, and of course that's a far stretch to say a spot of light on the floor and then responsibility. It's a bit, but still, I think, if one can actually think of yourself in the context of something planetary, if you want, think of Kepler, the work he did, and that was so groundbreaking in a way. So, not that this is quite on the scale of Kepler, but I would like to toss this work of art in the kind of trajectory or the orbit of Keplerish kind of thinking. Same question: glacier melting, river running, aerial photography, and somewhere in the middle, roughly here, 3 rows up, there's a dam being built. This is a water. Hydroelectric power dam being built in Iceland. So this means the upper half, everything on the left side and up from that dam is now underwater. It's almost a mile deep on the deepest part, 800 meters. That's not quite a mile, but it's very deep at the deep. And then everything else on the right side is still there. So this is a little documentary of a space that was, which is now underwater. And of course, the whole question of damn hydrogenic electricity, the company from America who's running this to melt aluminum, there's a lot of debates. It's Alcoa. So it's a complex photo documenting something, a black river on a snowy white landscape. So almost like a Japanese calligraphic poem, Chinese if you want. So I have a handful of works like this. I thought I would just walk you through them. And there's not a lot left. And then we have roughly half an hour for some questions. Do you think? I mean, I always wonder whether I should talk long for few works or less for a lot of works. So now I'm kind of in between. I hope it's okay. I hope it's okay for you. This is the Waterfalls project that I was lucky to do in New York together with the mayor's office. A lot of people came together and supported this project. One of the main supporters, Aggie, who's here tonight. It's great to see you, Aggie. The Waterfalls, I thought, for me, was about claiming space, taking space, simply. I know from Iceland when I'm in front of a landscape and I look at the landscape, and I always get so excited because there's nothing in the landscape that kind of indicates the size or the scale, the depth, and you look at it, there's no trees. You almost cannot even see the wind because there's no grass blowing, there's no, the things that normally indicates depth, distance, height are gone. Right? It's like being on the moon, and you go like, One way of making dimensions is by walking. Right? So I start walking, and the two mountains in front of me, one comes closer very fast, and one stays on the horizon. That means, the two mountains that I thought was roughly the same size, actually, the one is a small mountain close by, and the other was a big mountain far away. So by walking, I can create a sense of scale, right? Not just out there in the landscape, but also in my body. If I don't walk and I stop and I look around, it's hard for me to understand, again, the scale. But then there's a waterfall. I look at the waterfall and I go and I see the water. It falls very slowly. And I say, it's a high waterfall, right? Because water falls roughly with the same speed. And suddenly I realized the waterfall is also a sort of temporal indicator. It gives space, not just the time, but it also gives it the depth. I can, by looking at the waterfall, see how long time it takes me to walk there. I can measure the distance from here to the waterfall and the height simply by looking at it. It's very interesting. I was sitting in the Simeon Mountains on the northern end of Ethiopia, sort of looking into south of Sudan, and the amazing landscape is on the roof of Africa. It's also called the Simeon Mountains, and you can have your legs off the cliff like this, and there's a drop of a mile approximately, a kilometer. So it's amazing winds, the birds are coming up from, and you sit there and you just see the sun, and it's totally amazing. And I go like, wow, look. I wonder how far away, these small mountains down there is. And this is up in, I think it's like in 3,000 meters height. What is that, 10,000 feet? So, and then I go, and then I look down the rim and I see, there's a waterfall over there. And then the water falls so slow. And I go like, it's really deep. And I take my legs in, So it's very interesting what water can do to space. So now look at public space. Look at American public space, the history of public space, John Dewey, the work that has been made into making space the place in which we meet and share and exchange. And so public space has a rich history. There's different versions. There's the East Coast, West Coast, different ideas in New York and LA. So lots of material, right? Then there's Europe, the idea of Europe. So Southern Europe, Northern Europe is so the Italian public space, the kind of meeting up type of space, and the Northern European and so on. Something which I find very interesting as a space which is to a great extent there to facilitate and reflect the values that we have in our society, right? And to the extent that this is a success, we can debate, because of course what happens is that public space is to a great extent privatized. It is full of intentionalities, structures, power structures, political structures, and so on, where we think of it as being public, meaning free, but it is in fact not free. What do we do to claim it back? So the waterfalls for me was about suggesting ephemeral, temporal, sort of experiential materials, like qualities, indicating that this space actually has depth, especially the the sort of skyline in New York was the greatest skyline, but you also kind of look at it and say, it's exactly like a postcard. So it's a little bit like what I said about Stockholm in the beginning. We have to make sure that a space allows for the people to be in it. Sometimes a space can be so self-obsessed with its own rendering that it is only happy when rendered. We need to allow space to have enough space for people to meet. And you need a little space to meet, like 100 meter, 50 meter, 20 meter. Then at 50 meter, you can, oh, it's a man or woman. 20 meter, you can see whether they're smiling. 10 meter, you can tell, oh, better, I should move out, I should go to the person. That space is important. This is the space in which we build trust in each other. If you don't have that space, and if there's always kind of a store reaching out, hey, we want your attention. If we don't have enough space for us to sort of also see, oh, how do I feel? Do I feel okay? Does the space actually support my idea of going over to the person who fell on the bike and helping the person? Or does the space say, oh, don't, just just put on your Walkman and just go on. So I'm very interested in these things. So the resources, besides me being obsessed about Iceland and waterfalls and all of that thing, I think this is so for me it was about that and asking these questions. This is in Denmark, a museum, art museum, and I proposed them to put a rainbow on the roof, like a permanent rainbow. So that idea is still around, do you remember? And here you have a rainbow. If you stand in one place and just do nothing, nothing changes. You stand in the red area, everything's just red, which is not so bad also. But if you walk, which is also if you work, then things happen. If you walk around, the color changes. This means that the walking itself is what creates here the work of art. And what people do is that they come up here. It's a lovely walk because you kind of go through all the colors, and it's, as you can tell, really a very basic idea. And a lot of things happens because the museum, of course, got very excited because a lot of people who normally did not come to the museum suddenly started going to the museum saying, wow, this is art. It is also about looking at the world. It is about the perspective of looking, right? So we'll talk about this. And suddenly the museum downstairs, the distance between the two paintings became very interesting. We look at a painting, a great Munch painting. They have amazing Munch paintings. You go like, painting. But maybe the distance from one Munch painting to the next is also interesting. The time it takes for you to digest the narrative you just took in and how that produces the next. So the sequence or the temporal aspects of a museum is, of course, where the potential lays. It's not like I looked at a Munch painting and then I'm off, sort of, and then boom, again I look at a Munch painting. The success of a museum is, of course, the kind of temporal narrative that people take with them home. We don't remember moments, we remember pieces of time. The concert house, so as you can tell, I got more involved with architecture, crystalline structures, mathematical systems. This is a quasi-crystalline pentagonal principle brought into a kind of all-space filling principle. All-space filling is when you stack stuff without any cracks between them. So some time ago, I was lucky to have an engineer or sort of a thinker who comes out of visionary mathematics in my studio. I occupied him for a while, and he was obsessed with all space filling mathematical principles. Stackable. Everything was stackable. This, as you can see, is a stackable facade. But crystalline and acrylic glass and heat and so also a few questions of climate and insulation and technical solutions. What is maybe most interesting is what you see here, because if you're into sort of facade structures and you know a big steel facade like that, then you would know, well, normally there would be a column holding it. But as you can tell, it just stands all by itself. This means it's a self-carrying structure. And so there is a bit of engineering and a bit of science, if you want, into making this actually statically active. So that's a field that I've been quite interested in. So it's not an existing building on which I apply a work of art as kind of decorating, painting on something already there. It is a part of the building structure. So when the architect asked me to get involved because they needed to win the competition, I said, okay, but I want to do something that actually holds up the building. I don't want to do something that decorates the building. If I'm not a part of the building, I won't be a part of the team, which of course was not a problem. This is the model, my models. I've been looking a lot into mathematical and natural scientific sort of systems of space depiction and spatial processes and so on. I won't go into that too much here. The evolution of building. This is quite a while ago when the wall in Berlin came down. A few years did pass by before the walls of Albania came down. I was very interested in Albania when it came down because Albania was so closed and the city of Tirana was just in the center of Europe, but it had not been accessible as we all know and so on. So quite early on after Albania becoming open, there was a number of architectural competitions in which I was involved, and the mayor, Edi Rama of Tirana, invited me to be on a sort of advisory board for city planning, and I was not so long after I was not involved anymore. But the point here is that I started looking into well, how do we hand over the ownership of the space to the people who were deprived from thinking that they could produce space? And one of the projects was to let's make a city plan out of Lego bricks, and I called Kirk, the owner of Lego, said we need some Lego bricks in Tirana, and he was very interested because the people had never played with Lego. That's very interesting. It's almost impossible, and now there's like no one left. Right? But so I said, let's put in a big sort of a table, same size as the kind of sort of roughly depicting the city, and then let's allow people to go and then build. So a few things interesting. People started, territorially thinking about, well, should I be next to this person? And the kind of policemen from the city, the kids selling cigarettes out of this kind of, carable cig, they were standing next to each other. At some point, the gun from the policeman was like on the table, and the cigarettes of the kid was on this table. It's very interesting. And not that it was like kind of a revolution or anything, but there was this kind of coming together on a project. Details. A lot of the buildings had the Lego brick the other way around, like with the sort of round things going down, because nobody had actually necessarily built. And if you can see, they didn't press them very well together. Right? So we grew up, and I don't mean it's not like we and them, but by all means, it's just so interesting that the kind of knowledge that we have in our hands pressing a Lego brick together and so on. So the Lego owner, he was actually there, standing there, looking, and he was so surprised they wouldn't press it together. He's an engineer, so he said, "Why? I wonder why people don't. Why?" And it was so interesting seeing him looking and so lots of lovely details, but really also about what does it mean to share a space? What does it mean? Of course, some people immediately built a big wall and a fence around them, but some people started making bridges and breaking down the walls. Oh, I have to do like this. You sort of saw that in the introduction. I won't drag you through that again. But now it's going backwards. I wonder if you saw it before. Point is, so sometimes in my studio I do these spatial experiments. Some of them requires dancers to bring the body back into my work. Then I record it on film and make a little work of art of it. But the interesting part is really the idea if you can walk very slowly, and then you have the kind of slow motion trainer to come, and then we practice in the studio. Not that I need people to be slow, but interestingly, everything else gets proportionally fast. So I tried this. Oh, I wonder whether I have a slide where I'm walking. No, I don't. Okay. So anyway, is it there? Is it coming? If I press here? Is it after? Later? Okay, anyway, so it's coming out. It's very difficult to investigate time. Obviously, time plays a role in my works. Oh, this is actually a little film, but the one I think you saw also in the introduction. But time being kind of a co-producer of the works, I'll just go on, I'm sorry. Time being a co-producer of the work is, I think, very difficult, but very important, because time is so intangible. It's difficult to sort of control and make explicit. It does take time to build confidence. It does take time to build self-confidence. It takes time to experience. So that means we do in the studio where I occupy around 90 people, we do make some effort in exercising how does the passing or the flowing of time actually feel. I should ask you, Margaret, by all means. It's just so important that we don't forget how the experience builds the moment and turns into memories. So I work a lot with this thing, and I make an effort to bring some communal, let's say, projects into the studio where we invite people to come and eat. We have a few lovely chefs cooking every day, and the 90 people, this is the moment where the 3 teams in the studio, the architectural teams, the craftsmen who works with their hands, and the archive, the research and archive people, they all meet and they exchange, formalities and informalities. And often we have friends like, I just see this is Rickfried down here in the corner, sneaking in and having a bite. The studio has, if you don't mind me walking down the path of the studio a little bit, the studio has on the top floor, that's the red building there on the left side, it's the studio. On the upper floor, it has a school. It had a school which closed 2 weeks ago, where I, for 5 years, under the funding of the Science Ministry in Berlin, were looking into educational methodology in art education. I know a lot, Molly and a few friends from here has also been there, and we really tried to build a system which was driven by non-curriculum education, where we took for granted something very important, that the students were already creative by the time they made it into the school. So I didn't have to teach them to make art. I was there to help them to bring thinking into doing, and also having confidence with abstraction, something that is less tangible, not quantifiable. The success could be in the temporal and not in the sort of solidification of the idea. And the school brought about it a lot of experiments. So one experiment, as you can see, this is a flag, kind of flagpole, but the flag itself is a piece of metal. When the wind blowed, it was like thunder. It was a lovely student project, so it's like the thundering flag. We took that down to Addis Ababa, where I spent 2 months with the studio, also teaching and kind of collaborating with the Addis Ababa University and a department there. And the thundering flag, of course, meant something very different in Ethiopia than it does in Berlin. Not too different, though. Another flag. So it's not that all the students, it sounds like they only do flags, but this is like a giant flag that you sort of walk through the city. Or the idea of taking away the eyes, sort of getting a sense of space. And student experiments where physicality, the doing component, was maybe more in focus than I wouldn't say we're not thinking, but thinking alone for sure won't make you an artist. Walking through the city using a reflected image. It's actually very difficult. But an interesting exercise, because you have to kind of work a little bit on the construction of how you see things. Suddenly you can make new rules. Motoric, frictions. So taking away the basic motoric, just making the cutlery like a meter long is very difficult to say. But you kind of also spatial. The famous studio lioning experiment. So we're trying to train to be a lion. We did that out last night up in the media lab. Any lions from last night here? So we were all on, Jeffrey. Anyway, so we were up. It's my 4th lecture, as I told you. We had a lovely lecture last night with the tickling laughter and the lion experiment. To lion is, of course, pretending to be a lion. Once you start to pretend to be a lion, you realize, I could actually get into that. I could get very good at it. And to become a lion, it is not so easy, but it's also not impossible. And you start with the paw, right? So you can, and it takes like, we won't do it now, but you can sort of, it's called pawing. The pawing exercise is already in your mind. There's a little space in your brain that starts to evolve. How do I make a lion paw? So 2 cushions, so like a lion, 2 cushions. There's sort of nice little 4 toes on the front. You can kind of like, you can start to the pawing exercise, and if you go through the whole thing, you get lion. And there's the famous Sphinx down here. It's a French. I can talk about this. The lion experiment comes out of the French conceptual dancer who you might know had a lot of success in the 90s, called Xavier Leroy. Is that his name? Xavier Leroy was like an amazing French dancer, conceptual dance, who made a lot of physical experiments like one does in dance, but turning the studio into a savanna was a very healthy exercise. See, that's a classic lion posture. Our slow motion trainer, that guy on that photo, now you see, and I'm coming closer to round this up, talking about little son. Do you have a little son? Frederik, do you have a little son? Oh, yeah. Good. So see, this is I went to China, outside of Shanghai, in the Xishun Gardens, amazing rock gardens with amazing architecture, and I made a film about time and space. And these are the gardens that went before the Japanese gardens, the kind of the ancestor to the Japanese gardens, and they're lovely. Here it's winter, so there's no leaves, very minimal. And Sten, who is an old street dancer, now a slow motion specialist. So it's about so public again, like the street and the kind of. As you know, in China they have all these round doors, and I had these mirrors in the film, and the film is 20 minutes long. So. Just that one shot, or is it? Just see the next scene. Here, Sten is treeing. See the tree on one side? I can't. It's really funny, I think. But anyway, so this is me just bringing to an end. So I actually do, to get inspired, I sometimes go out. This is the park close to my studio. And then I'm not as good as Sten in slow motion, but I go out and I train. And doing that in public space is like also investigating the elasticity of the public space. Does the public space really like me making slow motion in it? And look at that lovely woman there, how she looks at me, and she goes like, what is this guy doing? But the question is really not her looking at me. The question is more, how does she feel? Right? Does she feel comfortable or uncomfortable? But just because I'm walking slow motion, does she kind of hold on to her back? So we have to ask ourselves, the spaces in which we move, what feelings do they facilitate? What type of artistic intervention would maybe make that explicit or challenge that even? Is it a problem that people move differently? Or is maybe it's good? Maybe diversifying movements is interesting. Do you mind me just skipping that picture? And this one, and going to this one? Because I think I spoke for a while. I'll just grab a little. So a few years from now, a father from my son's class, or a guy who has a son in the same class as my son, and I were talking, and it turns out he was a solar engineer and knew a lot about light, and I'm obsessed with light and the kind of ephemeral quality of light, and the sun, as you have seen, and suddenly we had, to make a long story short, we had this idea of storing light, storing energy. And if you could go out into the sun and kind of take some sun, just do like this, and then record the sun, almost like sample, like a DJ makes a sample, and then you take it somewhere else, and then you say, okay, and this is the light I can show you here. This is how the sun in Berlin looks like. This is sunlight from Berlin. We recorded the light with this one, the little yellow, the little black thing here, and now I'm playing it here in Boston. So it's very interesting. The light from Berlin traveled, so the ephemeral quality of the light from Berlin traveled with me on the plane and came to Boston. And of course, what that means is that I have a little power station. I have access to power in terms of decentralized power. I have my own power station. I am my own power station. I can choose to have energy that is mine. I charge not just the power station, I charge myself. So it's very interesting with regards to, do I feel resourceful or not? Do the space in which I am allow me to feel resourceful? What type of space am I? Maybe the power in the space I am, it's highly, let's say, centralized. Maybe I have to support the oil industry. No? So maybe the power is really not the power I want. Maybe I want this power instead. If I'm a child who grows up reading my bedtime stories with this slide from 6 and so on, maybe I'm more likely, once I have to make a choice for energy in my house when I grow up, maybe I'm more likely to have confidence in solar energy or in alternative energy resources. There's so much material in this which is about so many things. Frederik Ottesen, the engineer who's sitting over here, you should talk to him because he's really very MIT if you want. The confidence in this was to a great extent inspired by the collaboration between engineering and creativity. The need, of course, is to raise the question, the awareness, the policy making about what does it mean to have access to energy and who have that responsibility. And we very quickly came to the conclusion, well, this has to work for everybody. It is not about off-grid. It's about every grid, both off and on-grid. Of course, this story about the climate that I was talking about, suddenly you have a little thing here that makes something a little bit explicit. Let's just say it's a foot in the door in understanding what on earth is energy. Right? So normally it just comes out of a plug somewhere, and then you just take it. And we sometimes make the mistake, we take the energy for granted, as if it was just like kind of in abundance. To understand that energy, you have to go out, you have to collect it, and to have a little power station sort of teaches you, just like when what do you call this? When we got the little first steam machine, like how amazing is that little thing with a boiler where water and then a little wheel turns, and then you have energy like boiling the water. So this is the kind of same thing. Of course, we then went specifically to address the need for energy in certain groups. We're looking now at rural parts of the world where there's no energy access, such as Africa. We have worked for 2 years. We're on the ground in Africa in 8 countries. We're selling them through different sort of private, market-driven, NGO-driven, also with a market component. It's not an aid project, and some governments are totally not successful. Working with governments is impossible. But the other people, this is a great success in terms of we are seeing fantastic sales in the world where there is energy at a higher price, $20, $30. Actually, MoMA in New York is next week launching their spring catalog where this is on the cover. So they have a lot of lamps and so on and so forth. We're selling them here in Boston also. We started selling them on museums and online and design stores and so on. With that profit, we deliver the lamps in outlets which also sell them to build local economies, microeconomies, sort of street vendor economies, informal economies. And by doing so, we hope to create sort of enough profit at the sort of end of the, the last mile in order for them to order more lamps. So it's really not just about somebody resourceful and somebody less resourceful. It's about sort of sharing a vision and obviously distributing the resources accordingly. But the core of this is a lot of the things that I spoke about in the other project. This is a work of art that then has wandered outside. And sometimes for a lot of people, it doesn't necessarily mean or it doesn't necessarily have to be a work of art. But it's never just functional. It's never just something functional. Oh, I need light. If it doesn't touch you emotionally, if you don't feel like you're holding hands with the sun, you won't buy it. You're not going to convince somebody to buy a bag, a woman's bag, so we just confirm that, if it's just to carry your stuff around in it, right? If that was it, we wouldn't have all these incredible companies now with all these brands and so on. If it was all about functionality, this is the same thing. If it doesn't aspire people, so a young mother taking her 2 kids to school, walking out in the morning, charging this lamp around her neck, and the woman next door says, "Oh my God, look at you! You have to wear this because you don't have energy, or you are a victim. You are a victim." No, the woman who takes her kids to school, and who make their homework with this in the evening, that woman needs to say, oh, look at me. And the woman next door has to say, oh, amazing, why don't I have one of these? This is cool. So there's a lot of stories in this, but we are trying to address the language in the same way we would do here. That this is about desire, aspiration, inspiration. It's about creativity and self-confidence. And this is, I think, where engineering and creativity can work together. And of course, a great amount of the success of MIT has been in its ability to lean out into other fields. And I would encourage, on the sort of occasion of today, and in the spirit of the McDermott, I would encourage this to continue to take into your heart the potential of working together with let's just say the culture sector, into the arts, into the dancers, into the people who are slow, into the people who are fast, into the writers and theaters and ballets and music and so on. And I think this is the way to the future. As I said in the beginning, the models through which we are going to create change. Of course, some engineering is needed. I give you that, Frederik. But touching people takes something more than engineering. Touching people alone won't do it also. So the coming together between the thinking and the doing, the thinking being engineering and the doing being engineering, the thinking being also art and so on, this is, I think, one of the solutions in which we can create a lot of change. I thank you so much for coming here. We have a few questions. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Thank you.
So you'll take some questions.
Yes.
Good. We have some time for questions and comments, and I believe we have some microphones, so we'll pass those out. And anyone want to go first? Yes, please, if you would. We need someone on this side, someone on that. Thanks so much. I just saw a hand there.
Hi, this is really loud. This might be kind of a broad question, but what would your advice be to a younger artist who aspires to your level of greatness?
I think, so to my participant in the school, I always said it's a matter of life and death. If they, within the question they're asking, can't sense the urgency, maybe it's not the right question. And the urgency can hide itself in very obscure ways, but it's really important to sort of, let's say, to sort of focus on why before you focus on how. So a lot of people say, oh, how do I this, how do I that, and so on. But the question why, and it's a much more difficult question to ask, is this really necessary? Why is this necessary? Especially if you're an artist where you seem to be doing a lot of not so necessary stuff. You have to still find a little thin string. Maybe it goes down to a hand sketch, like the little bit of hand dancing on a piece of paper. Maybe that's enough why. I don't mean the rational, big, justifying why. Just the kind of confidence, oh my God, I thought something, now it's on the paper, it's amazing. But you have to have the confidence in the worthwhile. And that does take some stamina. As we all know, it's very difficult to make a little sort of doodle on a napkin. I mean, to make one that actually sort of matters is very difficult.
Thank you very much. This was extraordinary. I don't know how much time you have here in Boston or the area, but if you haven't, I would hope you'd have a chance to visit Artists for Humanity in South Boston, because what you were describing, this last project, to me so encompasses what is going on at AFH.
Thank you. Yes, I could not agree more. I've been coming to Boston. Actually, my first one-person show, I should have said that right away, was at in America. The first one-person show in America, at the ICA in Boston, and with Jill and Jesse Morgan, and soon after the first retro, it's not exactly the survey show of my work, was in San Francisco that traveled, and I just also said, because Madeline, who did that show, you mentioned it at the beginning, is actually here, aren't you, Madeline? Oh, there you are. Hi, Madeline. Yes. Hi, love. No, so, but yeah, so you're totally right, and no, I am not here for long enough.
Let's see, how about all the way in the back there? Yes, that you. Stacy, you're going to have to stay up there, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Was your work in any way inspired by Christo's work?
I like the idea that Christo could create this kind of public, attention. Wrapping the Reichstag was just, around the time where I was going to Berlin a lot. Second week into my art school, I started in October 1989. End of October, 2 weeks into art school, the wall in Berlin came down, and I drove down, and so on. And then, the wrapping of the Reichstag was very important for me. I was actually more into the dematerialization team from the West Coast. Robert Irwin, I love Robert Irwin, James Turrell, the people who somehow suggested that psychology, contemplative ideas, if the dematerializing art could be of some importance. Later, I became more interested in the East Coast, people like Judd and the kind of more sort of structurally organized people. Christo kind of came later on. I was more like Gotthold Matter Clark or more Robert Morris.
Oh, hi. I'm very interested in the participatory part of your work and how the spectator becomes a participant, for example, in the weather project. So I'm wondering, to what extent do you plan for a particular reaction, and to what extent is it a surprise?
Well, going to art school in the late 80s, early 90s, that was very rewarding for me, as a certain regime of objecthood kind of ended. The 80s ended. There was some focus back on kind of more political or activistic ideas. But, a few like amazing artists like Felix Gonzalez Torres, Katie Nolan came out of America, like unbelievable, interesting times. And for me, it was a moment where the avant-garde idea of freedom, which was so important for art, like that created the kind of modernism, the idea was somehow suddenly engaging again with responsibility. Then we had phenomenology in the 90s. We had Deleuze and people who were thinking about the sharing, the co-producing, the co-authoring, the negotiations, the fact that reality was to some extent relative. Bruno Latour came along with introduced soft sciences or social sciences, and I was really just stepping stones through all those people. I don't. As an artist, you can just hop through all of that and enjoy, sort of just read the best parts. But the point here is that combining this idea of freedom and the responsibility that comes with that, and then the idea of responsibility very much is about freedom is always about me, 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 me. I want to be free. And there's a degree of, at some point you can be so avant-garde that you kind of disconnect. You become so much about the conditions of your own, the freedom of speech almost. So I think my generation, and I'm lucky to be a part of that generation, this sense of responsibility introduced the notion, well, you cannot be responsible if you're only one person, like with freedom. You have to be at least two people, and better even more. This is where the door sort of opened to the kind of idea of the participatory productivity, I would almost call it, considering the visitor, the museum being, almost as important as the artist. So being an artist, I would just sort of just keep it. And of course, and the truth is, museums think that they are the most important, so they kind of miss the whole thing. But the point, but by all means, if there would be no artists, there would be no museums. It's just sort of make that. But then you have the visitors. Probably also there would be without visitors, there would no. So I think the participatory also have to do with showing that trust in people being able to use abstraction for something valuable is so important, and it just doesn't happen. You know, if you look at the ways that how should I say, if you look at the internet, now I had this amazing meeting with all these so talented people up at the Media Lab, several groups and so on. So now I'm very uncertain whether what I say is now actually true. But you know, the tendency is, of course, people, they kind of just consume, they don't produce. And I've learned today this is maybe not totally true. But generally speaking, I'm very interested in handing over the trust to the people that they feel that they can actually produce realities. So art is like a reality machine, but if you don't participate in it, it doesn't do anything.
Right there, if you can just pass the microphone, thank you.
Hi. As a light artist, do you feel a sense of responsibility in promoting solar power and energy efficiency in your installations, like as a sort of role model for people and artists to follow? Or do you choose that in your work?
Yeah, to some extent. I have, I'm not maybe the kind of typical ecologically very correct artist, but I'm also not the worst. You know, I think, to be honest, I have to a great extent become involved with being, like you suggest, that, well, you know, I better start using LED bulbs in a sculpture. Because somehow it's also important. But I also have to say that looking at, you know, what do you call it? Condescendent lamp is not the right word. There's sort of incandescent. Then if you look at that, it's just so much more beautiful than a bloody LED. So what do? If you want to address beauty. But then again, these lovely LED companies, they keep sending me small samples and say, and the quality of the light actually does get better, a lot better actually. And now, you know, we have, you know, great LED panels who are, very, very interesting. But it's important to understand it's just, you know, it's maybe in an evolution. It is not replacing something else. It's maybe something which is just ending, and then something else is, you know, taking over. And this is so. So in that sense, yes, I have started becoming much more aware of it. It took me some time. It did take me some time. This is an LED, and it's interesting. You know, not a long time ago, that was an expensive LED. Now it's like this is a quality LED, and now it's, well, how much is it, Frederick? 0.06 cent, and it's a good LED. It's from there's no advertisement. It's not, I won't say it, but we bought it, so I don't have to say it. But this is the price of an LED. I remember in I started school 70s. There's this amazing girl in the 7th grade. I was first grade. And she had this, I thought I should have said it at the beginning. She had this incredible, so I was very curious. She had this amazing calculator in her bag. And I was like, I was not exactly in love with her, but I thought she was amazing. And then I looked at it, and then it had all these other, you know, it was brown and gold, and they had red digits. And I just looked at that red color, and it's so funny because it was a Texas Instrument. And I was so excited to see there was the numbers 1 to 9, and then plus minus, and then there was all the other things one could press on. I was like, my God, like all these and the red color of that light. So I was at the beginning. I remember from very early on being taken about the kind of the quality of an experience of light, and this incredible girl, and you know, the engineering effort. And it's actually the first time I came across, and I remember it very clearly, a Texas Instrument. Do you remember they were kind of gold and brown? It's kind of funny.
Right here.
Hi. How collaborative is your studio?
Say that again?
How collaborative is your studio?
It's, I rely a lot on the talent at the studio. There's a lot of things that I've done it all. And then at some point in the process, I say, oh, too much logistics, I want to only do the creative stuff. Then you ask somebody to do it, then it turns out they do it much better than, a little bit better than I did. And it just so turns out that actually it has become, it's become a much better run place after other people assisted and took over and so on. And now, of course, where is the slasher? I would like to think that I'm the artist and the one who makes the call. And this means that I start an idea, I start a process. Very often it's fed by an already existing, but I start something. Then we branch into 5 options, and we work on 5 options, digitally models, build it, make it testing with water, underwater, with light or something. And then say, oh, the 3 options, they are impossible, I don't like them. Why don't we take these 2 options? Then everybody works on these 2 options. And then we build a model of the space, 1-to-1. We take the space from the museum, literally moves it to Berlin. Then we build it up. And then there's two teams almost, and then I'm involved. Then we bring in theory, criticizing, did somebody do something similar? What were they thinking? So 200 years ago, there was a kind of a symphony about that particular problem. Should we listen to that while we do it? So and then a lot of ideas are coming together. So it's a little bit difficult to say where is the exact sort of boundaries. But we are, I hope we all agree that I'm the one who makes the sort of the final call. But I have on the other side, I've always had an open door policy, because there is a lot of artists, and bless them for that, who have closed and mystified the artist studio and kept, in order to prevent, and I would argue for market reasons, the kind of this idea of sort of keeping secret that there's like a painter who only makes painting and has like 90 assistants painting. So kind of like sort of obvious he has to keep it closed, because it was sort of not so good for his market, you could say. I don't think of that being a problem. I think, why don't everybody just come and look for themselves? And I don't mean that literally. But the principle is, that's why I've done a number of works addressing the studio as a laboratory, as a sort of producer. I worked with the idea of mixing the museum, the studio, the residency. The school was in my studio exactly to kind of show the students, well, let's just be pragmatic. Let's be MITish about it, and sort of think of it as a lab. Obviously, one would think that there is a degree of leadership at MIT as well, sort of pushing the things in the right direction. And I think of my studio like that, and I have no problem suggesting that art can, to a great extent, be a collaborative effort like that.
Please, yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the nature of viewers' engagement with your work after the project is completed? Like, the weather project looks so fantastic, but none of us will ever see it. And so there's a real dilemma there where, on site it seems very immersive and emotional and interactive, but then we only experience it 10 years later as a kind of discourse.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that so for me it doesn't really ever end, and it's not like the work before was somehow less important than the actual work. And now with the weather project, it did end and it did close. I remember they wanted to prolong it. We did one time prolong it. Then they were so successful, they said, why don't we run it for another 6 weeks? And then I said, no, let's close it. It's like so successful, why not close it now? But it did continue. It turned out I was with a professor today up at the Media Lab. What was his name, Lila?
Which one? I'm sorry.
The guy who had the photo of the weather project on his book.
William Uricchio.
What?
William
Uricchio from CMS. So he had a book with a, so it's sort of still around, you know what I mean? The weather project was on the cover of his book, and he actually had so funny, he actually had asked for permission, but it's an old book. And in a way, these projects, I look at them more as kind of cause and effect. So you do something that sets some motion into action, and eventually something dies out and something still moves. So the project isn't really over in that sense. It was not about the actual shape of the project. It was about well, I shouldn't say science, but it was about the kind of material that it negotiated. And that material is still around. The work is still producing reality. in this case, it's a sort of a dialogue. It's hopefully being considered as a work that is worth bringing up in different discussions. Yeah.
Maybe this gentleman there in the center has had his hand up. If you would just. Thank you.
I saw the weather project in London and was impressed by it. I may be the only other person here with solar, so here's some light from Cambridge from yesterday.
Great. Great.
So that's about 10 years old, off-the-shelf equipment that I've been using for my bike lights every day since then. And it's amazing to me that I'm the only person that I see walking around MIT with something like that, or Cambridge, or Boston. There are very few people who take care of that. In the little sun, one of the things that I find about solar is that it's currency and local production in the terms of Gandhian economics, Swadeshi, local production. But light is one currency. Electricity, which is what runs the light, also can run AA batteries, which are the most used batteries in the world, and charge cell phones. And there's 7 billion cell phones now in the world for 7.5 billion people. And I'm wondering if you're extending your idea from light to the currency of electricity and the economics of a solar Swadeshi.
Yes, it's a good question. And the thing is, I've been stepping through departments here, and I've been meeting definitely 20 people who are working with solar and small solar objects and the micro solar systems and so on. So there's like solar if you ask me, there's like solar everywhere. But yes, I know Frederick tells me not to be talking about it, but we are this summer actually bringing out the Little Sun mobile charger. Sort of a very beautiful, exactly because of the same thing. We are working very hard on our retail and business model and delivery systems and the whole economic sort of so-called BOP economic, and we had great Sloan input also on some ideas on that. So I didn't say that before. You should really not hesitate to go to littlesun.com. And there's a few introductions. Some are more technical if you're more in the kind of nerdy area, and some are more emotional if you're more sort of creative. But what I'm actually asking you is, see, that's not quite going to do it. You have to then, there's all that like it, send it, Instagram, and so all that social media stuff, which we live off. So this is how people actually learn about the story and bring about. And we have brought, and I didn't bring that number, we have produced 250,000 lamps. About 180 we have already delivered. 30%, 1/3 has been delivered in off-grid. So it's a great equation. This means we have in the 1.5 years, almost 2 years, we have actually had a robust curve. This is why I have to tell you, it's not enough for me to talk, you need to go and then say, send it to a friend and like it, and Facebook and all of that. Because simply this has been what has been driving us. So the online communities, the sharing the stories, the uploading images has been one of the drivers in the success, which we also talked about here at MIT, because there's so much talent in that field as well. So it's very interesting. It's not just engineering and art. It's also communication, retail policy making, new economies, economical model, micro-distribution, last mile successes, and so on. I have rarely learned. It's like being a young artist again. I have learned so much from this project. I will also learn to be humble. It's very new for me.
I think we have time for one more. Yes, please.
I mean this in the broadest sense possible, but to you, what is the place of spectacle when you're making art?
I'm sorry, say that again.
For you, what is the place of spectacle when you're making art or thinking about art?
So I work a lot with the sort of experiential potential. And of course, I would want people to take a groundbreaking experience, and that could be a sort of micro, or should I say nano groundbreaking experience, or like a really groundbreaking, sort of the big sort of pathetic groundbreaking type of experience. But I'm also quite aware of there is an economy which is very active within the notion of the spectacle. And that economy has brought about the experience industry or experience economy and of course the kind of shallow or hollowness of the spectacle with regards to facilitating a profitable idea of how to drive the experience economy. So I'm sometimes, frankly speaking, torn between, how can I suggest that what I do is not just hollow, right? How do you, in the world today, it's also hard to see, and you look at something and go like, well, does this person actually really mean it, or is it just some kind of la-la-la? And it's difficult, and it's getting difficult, especially as the museums and the institutions that facilitate art, they are forced in our society into systems where they need to quantify their successes by virtue of telling the politicians so and so many numbers, so and so much success criteria that you can actually measure is how we run the museum. And of course, then the artists, you go like, huh? What about if my show was not, a sort of a high hitter in numbers? Does that mean it wasn't good art? So of course we are seeing situations where the spectacle is kind of becoming an ambiguous situation, where a museum is kind of forced into a situation where, well, if we are going to keep up the funding, we have to deliver something like that. And then they call me, right? And then I have to have that bit of dancing with the museum about, well, instead of talking about how, we should talk about why. And that takes a little time sometimes, because once you're into the discussion of why, normally you can nail the museum down to the values that they used when they started. And this is, I think, where it gets interesting. And then you can bring museums into the sort of risk zone. And then you obviously need to not just call the fire department and say, oh, it's going to be okay, just let's do it. It's going to be okay. You also call the politician and say, why don't we take that risk? For God's sake, it's about art anyway. It's not about politicians and so on. And sadly, this is getting increasingly difficult, I have to say. Museums are being so forced into the traditional commerce, the commodification of our senses, the experience economy, blah, blah, blah. So there's a very important area there. And we also have to say in America, the private sector is the one that is supporting the museums. We need the private sector to be very risk-oriented. And as we know, the private sector is not necessarily the most risk-oriented people, and by all means, the public sector is not risk-oriented as well. So it's a very interesting discussion. How do we facilitate a space in which an experience can be about the experience and not about all that other stuff? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a word. The Council for the Arts at MIT has demonstrated, again, impeccable taste in selecting Olafur. And I've got to say, if Fredrik Ottesen is very MIT, sir, so are you. Yeah. Delighted you're here.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.